What's good, YouTube? Warstorm here, coming at you guys in another video today. Before I get to the main topic, though, and there, of course, will be a link in the description box for you to skip to. So, if you guys want to skip to the main topic video, which is Danger FTK, I want to talk about. Okay, I want to talk about a few things, which is been away for a little bit. So, as I have been for the past few months, I know I haven't, really has been as active as I used to be as far as uploading videos. But basically, I've had some of my family members, my parent has recently had surgery, so I've been at home and working, and it's not exactly an optimal space for filming videos when your family members are kind of recovering. You're having to kind of like keep it down, take care of them, stuff like that. So that's the main reason why. It's nothing really else going on. I haven't had a chance to sit down and work on videos as much as I like. Red Dead 2's also been taking some of my time away as well. I'd readily admit that. But anyways, so and another things, I will be attending the Houston Regional. For you guys who are wondering, I will be trying to get rec profiles. So if you guys are going, look out for me, because I will I'll be participating in the actual event, but I'm hoping to, between rounds, to be able to get, and maybe once the rec day is over, or when I end up dropping, whichever happens, I'll be going around the event trying to get some deck profiles. So if you guys are interested, come find me. I'm not opposed to recording anything. If you guys have Thunder Dragon, Sky Striker, any kind of deck like this, let me know. I will film just about anything, provided it is built well. So, all the way, we're going to talk about Danger FTK. Now, I want to have in mind that the contents of this video may not be as relevant not in the near future, because we do have the ban list does say no sooner than November 20th, which this day this video is going up, it's going to be 11 days. This is November 9th. So, but in the meantime, if you do have regionals during this particular season, you're going to have to be dealing with this deck. So that's something that you really do need to keep in mind. And what do I do, and why is this deck strong? So we all know when Danger first was revealed, at least I thought, it was a very, very well-designed deck with just the initial wave of cards, and it was only going to get better as time goes on. And that has not changed. The deck is still super powerful, but now it's involved in an FTK, a very consistent FTK that tends to have multiple different builds. At first, we didn't know whether it would do as well with that Summon Sorceress, but it turns out, it did just as well in Europe without Summon Sorceress, unlike something like Thunder Dragons, which needs Summon Sorceress for deck function. This is a little bit different. So, in terms of this Danger FTK deck, we want to know, okay, and the scariest thing about the deck is Elder Entity Azathoth, because while it doesn't hit the board immediately, they do need 2 level 4 monsters to rank up into it off of a Nyarla, I think its name is, because it cuts off from hand traps in turn, and there's no way to stop it. It is a summoning condition, like Kali Yugioh, the DDD rank 8. When it hits the board, everything gets turned off. You can Valor it, you can try if you want to. It doesn't really matter. It's going to still apply. So that's what makes it really scary. And that being said, the good thing for you guys is when you do go second, there are things you can do to stop the deck dead in its tracks. One of the '1 stoppers, in my opinion, to this deck overall is Droll and Lockbird. So Droll and Lockbird's been a card that it's kind of faded out of the format. When Goki got its initial hits, especially in America where we have Summon Sorcerers, there was a pretty lengthy period of time after Nationals where once Summon Sorceress was available to play, Goki isn't nearly as reliant on resolving those Goki grave effects, so Droll doesn't completely end their turn anymore, especially when they're playing things like Armageddon Knight, Destiny Hero Malicious, these warrior package toolbox cards. It's very difficult for Droll to stop them dead in their tracks. And you analyze the other decks of the format, it's not really good against anything else. I mean, it's okay against Thunder Dragons, I guess. You can stop them after their initial search play, but it really didn't do very much. But now against Danger FTK, because, it stops them dead in their tracks. Because all the Danger monster effects, while they can still summon themselves, it's ruled just like Minerva, where Minerva still allows you to mill, because it doesn't know how many cards you don't know you're going to get the Danger effect upon activation, but they aren't getting that draw and digging for resource, and that's a really, really big thing. On top of that, Droll will also prevent them from using things like Nessie, things like, the search parts of the deck, portions of the deck. It will prevent that. It will prevent them from drawing into more resources. If you're playing in Europe, things like Skull Dread will be completely turned off. That's pretty darn big. It covers a pretty hefty amount of bases for the deck, and the fact that it needs to draw to function means you can take advantage of that through Droll. Basically, after they resolve one draw card or danger effect to draw, drop Droll and Lockbird, they aren't going to be drawing any more cards the rest of the turn. And like I said, the biggest problem is it doesn't really touch the rest of the decks, the format, very much, and that's honestly the problem with it, or the problem at least I have with it, but it's definitely something you can slap in your side deck, and it will get the job done. In terms of, other, hand traps and the like, of course, if you are super worried about burn damage from the Cannon Soldier, there is Haniwata. There are other anti-burn cards like Leonidas and Extra Veiler, but Haniwata is just the best one because immediately you can just chuck it right away before the Azathoth even hits the board, and you're pretty much good to go. You won't take... Now, the important thing to know is just because they cannot burn you does not mean they can't kill you. The biggest thing I've noticed is that from what the European players said who did well at the YCS about with Danger FTK is they said they can OTK you with or without the burn damage. So even if you Haniwata them, they can still, and if you're going second, they can still set up a pretty formidable board with just spamming danger monsters to the field. So that's also something to think about. But if you're really just worried about the burn damage, Haniwata tends to get the job done. As far as anti-grave hand traps, there are a few. There's, of course, Ghost Spell. Ghost Spell has the added bonus of hitting more things than some of the other cards I'm going to mention that hit the grave. But it is very expensive. But nevertheless, it also hits Thunder Dragons because it stops Thunder Dragon Hawk from reviving a Thunder Dragon out of the graveyard. It stops a fair amount of things. It stops Kagari from adding back from grave against Sky Striker. And it can also, it's not the only thing, it also stops the firewall ad for any kind of extra linking base deck and Danger FTK, because most of the time, unless they hard draw Cannon Soldier, which is very possible with all the draw cards the deck plays, if they have to dump it to the graveyard, you can simply Ghost Spell on the firewall ad, and while they'll keep in mind the firewall's actual effects will still be live, but it will at least prevent them from adding the Cannon Soldier back from the grave. That's pretty darn good. Alternatively, you also have DD Crow and Skullmeister. DD Crow, Skullmeister is a weird one to me because, well, technically it has attack points, but you're not going to be using it in that capacity in most cases. But it does cut off at least one grave effect from the danger monster. The problem is it doesn't remove it from the equation, so they can still, revive it with things like Chupacabra, so it's not fantastic. But it gets the job done, can get the job done in some cases. You also have DD Crow. So DD Crow is a little bit more flexible because even though dangers technically have to be discarded, so DD Crow will still prevent them from activating because they're no longer in the spot where they were trying to activate. So DD Crow will cause their effects to not be able to activate. It will cause them to fizzle. I know judges don't like the term, but it's there. DD Crow will cause them to fizzle, and it is a lot more accessible than most of the hand traps I'm mentioning on this list if you do happen to go first. It's searchable via both Where Art Thou and the rank 1, I think it's called Recite Starling, I think its name is. I played it in Spirals, I don't remember its name off the top of my head, but it is pretty accessible by, unlike most hand traps in the game, so it's definitely one I would consider if I were you in it, because it's a pretty good hand trap. It covers a lot of situations, and I think it's pretty good. As far as, just general hand traps, Effect Failure can get the job done. The problem is, by the time the firewall hits the board, Effect Failure, the Elder Entity rank 5 will typically have already resolved, and that's what you want to be Veiling. Infinite Impermanence, on the other hand, while it is, again, like Bell, very, very expensive, it is very, very good in this particular instance because it slips under Azathoth's effect because it is not a monster effect. So not only does it slip under Call by the Grave if the Danger player happens to be playing it, it slips under Azathoth's effect, and the important thing to bear in mind, though, they still can bounce the firewall with the the Nightmare Unicorn's effect and bounce it back to the extra deck, so you're not completely out of the woods. Now, on the other hand, Ghost Reaper and Winter Cherries completely puts the firewall out of the equation. It removes, and there's so many decks that play the card in general that hitting that out of the extra deck is pretty good. The problem with Reaper is it is okay. It does hit Sky Strikers because it gets rid of can get rid of their Kagari, but Thunder Dragons can simply shuffle the fusions back with Thunder Dragon Fusion and make Titan with it, so you're not really getting anywhere with it against Thunder Dragons. But against Sky Striker, it's pretty good. It does, and it has the added benefit of getting Firewall out of the way. Now, much like I've said about a lot of these cards, Firewall is not the be all end all. They can still extra link you, so you need to think about that. Reaper cannot be the only thing. As far as as far as the other hand traps like Ash Blossom is kind of a weird one because there isn't always a key clear spot to hit. There's so many different things the deck does, but Ash Blossom can be pretty decent if you use it against things like Nessie. Nessie needs to search to function. You can also use it against their draw cards, but Ash isn't, like, there's not a lot of things there's also Armageddon Knight, but the deck isn't 100% reliant on resolving that card, so there are key cards that you do need to be hitting with Ash, but against this particular deck, it's not as good. You also have Ghost Ogre, and Ghost Ogre hits a fair amount of stuff if they are playing the build with Isolde and Summon Sorceress. If you're in America, you immediately use that Ogre on that Summon Sorceress. You can also use it on Firewall Dragon, but the problem is that as a thought will already have resolved by the time you would be dropping the Ghost Ogre in that particular case, in most cases, so it's very, very debatable as a card you can be running. However, a few other kind of outside the realm of what I've seen people suggest about the deck is an obscure old card named Forbidden Graveyard. This is a really, really old card. It's been a long time since I've even seen it, but I think it came out in the Shining Darkness, if I'm not mistaken, really old common. Quick play spell, it says discard a card, and graveyard effects are turned off for the entire turn. I've never actually seen this card seen play, but in this particular situation, it's pretty good. If you compare it to something like Different Dimension Ground, this does require you to go first. The thing I like about Graveyard is while it keeps the cards in the graveyards, they can use things like the beginning and the end. It completely shuts down anything that happens in that graveyard. And that is really big for the turn. They're losing all of those extra effects that, no Chupacabra reviving things, no Nessie searching, no Thunderbird or Bigfoot popping anything. They can still summon the monsters to the board, however, and still draw cards, so it's not going to end the game. But it's a pretty good little obscure card, and definitely highly, highly recommended for going first. There's also Abyss Dweller, but again, we're talking a rank 4 in a format where you're probably not playing a deck with rank 4s. You really have to scroll down the list of decks to find maybe Pendulum Magicians can make it, but much like Graveyard, it has the added benefit of hitting other decks. It hits but it doesn't really get the job done, I think. However, if you do want to floodgate out Danger FTK, Necro Valley is actually pretty effective. Now it is a field spell, but it is a floodgate in the traditional sense. It doesn't completely slow them down because they can still activate the danger effects. But there are things like Firewall Dragon's Add will not work with Necro Valley up. Chupacabra can't summon things from the grave. And those two things are enough for me to say. And because it's a field spell, you can search it with things like Terraforming. So if you're already playing a deck that plays a field spell that can live without the graveyard for one turn before you get rid of Necro Valley and get it off the board, it's a pretty good call. I don't know how good it is against... the only deck I can think of in the format that plays a field spell is maybe Sky Striker, but Sky Striker's probably not playing this card because it prevents them from using both Kagari and Ray's Grave Effect, so... But it is something you could think about, I guess, if you're playing Terraforming for Aerospace already. It is something to think about. There's also Mind Drain, which is kind of an obscure one. People suggested it for siding hand traps, which it also hits. But the main thing I like about it in this situation is it actually stops all the danger effects from activating in the hand. That's a key part of the strategy. Now, bear in mind, they can simply find a way, if they have a Nightmare effect. The problem with most of these floodgates is that they can get to Nightmare Phoenix, they will just pop it and move on their way. But it can be kind of difficult for them to be able to actually establish a board with Mind Drain up because all of their effects are monster effects that activate in hand. That's something you can take advantage of. Also, need to mention Called by the Grave. I feel like this is something I said countless times, but if you aren't main decking Called by the Grave in your deck, I feel like now is the perfect time. It hits so many things, and sniping a danger effect out of the graveyard is is great. Can be really fantastic. And the last couple cards I'm going to suggest for Danger FTK are, again, we're in the Floodgate territory. We're talking about monsters, which are Inspector Boarder and Majesty's Fiend. These cards essentially do the same thing if you open them against Danger. Now, Inspector Boarder is a little less flexible than something like Majesty's Fiend, but because you do have to, but you don't have to tribute for Inspector Boarder. Majesty's Fiend, however, they both have the same thing in common, where if you're going first and you have it out with some kind of backer or something set, Danger's going to have a bad time getting rid of it. Danger needs monster effects for basic deck function. If they can't activate their effects, they can't play. And I can't really off the top of my head think of a way Danger FTK can consistently out one of these two monsters, because unless they, side deck something in that removes them off the field, like Kaiju's for example, there's not really an out they have for these cards. So I think that's actually some pretty good ones, and overall I think it's about covers everything. So if you guys have any other suggestions of cards or things that work really well against Danger FTK, let me know down in the comment section down below, and I'll have all of these cards will be linked down below in the description box so you guys can check them out for yourselves and judge them for yourselves. But anyway guys, as always, thank you guys for watching. So Orstorm signing out.